This is my review of the Pink Floyd album, The Piper of the Gates of Dawn. It was released in 1967, produced by Norman Smith. Before I talk about the album, this is the beginning of my Pink Floyd reviews. I'm going to go all the way through all the Pink Floyd albums, just like I did with all the Beach Boys albums. So I'm going to go through from Piper to Endless River, and I'll probably throw in like Relics and a few of the live albums and stuff. So this album, I remember getting that. I got this sometime in 2007. We'd gone to the mall to see some movie. I don't remember what it was, but afterwards we'd gone to FYE, which was like the music store that they had there, and we're looking around through the CDs and stuff. And by this point, I was already pretty into Pink Floyd. They were kind of the second rock band I really got into. And I had heard them on the radio. I was on a camp out, and a friend of mine had this like radio, and he was always having trouble like getting the signal out there. And one day we were listening to it, and they played Money, and I'd never heard. I had heard a Pink Floyd song before, but I'll get to that probably when I review that album. And anyway, I was just immediately like, wow, what is this? And he's like, oh, it's Pink Floyd. And so I went and I got, ended up getting Dark Side for that Christmas. And by this point, I had, I think, Dark Side, Wish You Were Here, The Wall, Metal, and I don't know, I can never remember if I had the final cut at that point. I think I might have, but I don't think I had Animals quite yet. Anyway, so I had quite a few of the more popular Pink Floyd albums. I didn't have a lot of their earlier stuff, or any of their earlier stuff, and I hadn't heard any of it before getting this album. And this was after Syd Barrett had passed away. So I had heard of him. I remember hearing about him when that happened, but I hadn't heard any of his music yet. And I knew that this was really like the only album he was on, because I didn't have the internet at home, but I would read about the band on the internet at school. And so I had read kind of like their history and stuff, and I was like, okay, I'm curious to hear what, Syd Barrett's music sounded like. And so when I saw this album at the store, I think it was like $19. Like, it was pretty expensive for like a single CD. I think it was 17, something like that. But it was pretty expensive at the time, for me at least. And I kind of was like, do I really want to buy this or not? Because I didn't know any of the songs on it. And finally I was like, I want to get all Pink Floyd's albums anyway. And, this one is really different, and I don't know anybody that knows anything about it, so I'm going to get it and be the first one to find out anything about it. Because I had, some friends that were into a lot of the same bands as me and stuff, and they were Pink Floyd fans, and nobody that I knew had heard anything off this. Even right after I got it, we went and were eating at like the food court at the mall, and my uncle came to pick up my cousin because he was with us, and he was looking at the CDs we got, and he looked at this and he was like, I don't know anything on here. And so anyway, I go home, and it was my grandma was driving us home, and I like put it in the CD player, and I'm listening to it. I'm going through, like, because I didn't want to start it from the beginning for some reason. I don't know, I'm weird. I'm just like, okay, I'm going to pick a random song to start with, and so like I went through the track listing, and I picked The Gnome, because I was like, okay, The Gnome, that has to be interesting. And I listened to it, and I was like, what the f*** is this? And I hated it initially. My opinion completely changed soon after, but as I'm riding home with my grandma listening to this album, I'm just like, my like horrors mounting as I click through, you know, different tracks and just like listen to little bits of them and stuff, and I'm like, oh my god, this sounds nothing like Pink Floyd. What the fuck is this? And I just kind of stopped. I listened to, I think, like probably half of. I don't think I even listened to the full song, The Gnome. I think I just listened to a little bit of it, and I went through like 3 songs, I think, and just listened to little pieces, maybe more than that, maybe like 5. And I was just like, I can't do this. And I just put in something else and listened to something else the rest of the ride home. Well, then I got home, and I always put like all my CDs on my computer at the time because I like to listen to them that way because it was just easier. And I was put it on there, and I was just sitting there thinking all like depressed about how much money I'd spent on the stupid album. And finally I was just like, well, I'm going to listen to one more song, or check out like one more song, because I knew I was going to give it another listen again anyway, because like I'd spent too much money on it to give up on it that easy. But I was just kind of like, okay, I'm going to listen to like one more song tonight, and if I don't like it, then I'll wait a few days and listen to it again. I put on Bike, and just immediately was like, wow, this song is great. Like the first listen, I just like completely was like, wow, this is amazing. So I listened to Bike like 10 more times, and then I went back and listened to the rest of the album, and that time I got it. Like, I didn't love the whole album right away, but I liked enough of it that I wasn't disappointed that I bought it anymore, and I was like excited to go show it to people, which I showed it to a lot of people. Some people got it, some people didn't. One of my friends, he ended up loving it too. Like, we used to listen to it all the time. This was one of those albums we'd be hanging out and we'd be like, oh, let's put on Piper. And anyway, so yeah, the album just became really kind of my favorite Pink Floyd album, which is probably crazy to say. Some people were like, what? But I don't know. I almost consider this album like a different band than the later Pink Floyd, the stuff after Sid, because Sid is such a like dominant force here. The band's really kind of a different band, but Sid's a completely different songwriter than what they have later. He's a completely different guitarist than Dave Gilmour is, and he's a completely different singer. And like the way he is a guitarist, like interacts with the band as players, like his like place in the band kind of is different than what Dave's is later on. So it's like completely different band almost. It's like what would become later Pink Floyd kind of with Sid. So I don't know. It's when I say it's my favorite Pink Floyd album, I also kind of put like an asterisk there. I'm like, but it's almost like not a Pink Floyd album, but it still is, I guess. At the same time, though, like it for a long time, it was my favorite album, and it kind of eventually got passed, but it's still like my second probably. So anyway, the album opens with Astronomy Domine. I think that's how you say that. Which is, I think, a great opening track. I just love Sid's guitar part and how it kind of like comes in and just kind of builds. Although the loud like high pitched beeping that comes in is a little bit like too loud and like ear piercing at times. I feel like, which some of the sound effects on this album do have a tendency to like be just a little too loud, and that's the one kind of problem I have with it. Is just that. Other than that, I honestly think that the production sounds pretty good. Norman Smith, I know, was an engineer for the Beatles on some of the albums, and I think he did a pretty good job producing this album, or at least a pretty interesting job. It definitely seems like a pretty out there album for the time. Anyway, the Astronomy Domine, like the song as a whole, kind of almost, it reminds me of like a spaceship. Like it sounds like a spaceship. It's just a really cool song. Second song, Lucifer Sam, another song with some really cool like sick guitar parts. It's got this cool like spy movie type sound. Just a really catchy song about a cat. It's kind of, I think, feel like one of the more straightforward songs on the album, really. Kind of, I don't know. It's got some weird sounds and stuff like all the other songs on the album, but I just think it's a really catchy song. The third song, Matilda Mother, slowly kind of becoming my favorite song on the album. It's just I think it's like this. It's a nice song, like nice like story wise. I feel like because it has a lot to do with the song's basically about getting like bedtime stories or reading or something, or just being being a small child and being told stories, which was something I always really enjoyed. Was like having my grandparents tell me stories and read to me and stuff like that as a kid. So it reminds me of that, and it's just really cool musically and the way it sounds and stuff. There's actually I have an alternate version on this thing, which is just like another version of Hyper I picked up with that has a bunch of like extra stuff. And anyway, there's an alternate version with like different lyrics and stuff, and has this really cool sick guitar part that like is either not on this version or it's just kind of buried and you can't really hear it. But anyway, just a really cool song. The fourth song, Flaming, kind of a short, like weird little song. It's got a lot of weird sound effects, but a lot of like cool like stuff going on from Rick. But I've always really liked the song. Just kind of struck me as like a fun, catchy, like little whimsical song. The fifth song, Pow Artok H. Not sure if that's the right way to say this. But this is always kind of been my least favorite song on the album, but I still like it. I've never really skipped it that much because it's really weird and just definitely a really interesting listen. But for some reason, I guess I've always thought of it, like whenever I've thought of it before, I've always thought of it as a lot more disjointed than what I think it is now. Like I don't know, when I was listening to it tonight, I was like, okay, this is definitely, like, maybe I haven't paid this close of attention to it in the past, even though I've listened to it a ton. But it just seems like now when I listen to it, it doesn't seem as random as it used to. It does seem like it kind of follows like a thread. I mean, the ending still kind of goes off a little bit, but anyway, it was kind of rambling. But it's a really weird instrumental. I don't think it's bad though. Like I definitely see people not being into it. The sixth song, Take Up Thy Stethoscope and Walk, is the first Roger Waters song, which I really like the title. I think it's funny. Not the best Roger song. He would definitely get better later as a songwriter. But I actually like this one. I know a lot of people don't. I really find it as like a weak spot on the album at all, though. I think that it's got some really cool like jamming kind of by the band. It's got some cool Sid guitar stuff. Pretty cool song. The seventh song, Interstellar Overdrive. This is the instrumental that I liked more. It's like 10 minutes or so. Like it's really long, but it kind of starts out around this like Sid riff, and then it kind of like goes crazy in the middle, and then kind of comes back into that. So it's this cool kind of like trip it takes you on. And for some reason, I used to listen to it like going to sleep a lot, and it probably sounds crazy. I was weird. But yeah, I don't know. Like I would used to like to listen to it as I was like trying to get to sleep, and I would just kind of turn it down low a little bit because it does kind of come in loud at points. But I don't know. It was a cool song. I thought to kind of fall asleep to. The eighth song, The Gnome. This, like I said, I think I said already. I don't know. It's late, but this was the first song I tried to listen to off this album, and I hated it. But on like now, it's one of my favorite songs on here. I just think it's a really, really kind of charming, whimsical song about a gnome. Sid's singing on it. I love the way he like rolls the R's and stuff, and I think the like acoustic guitar on it sounds really good, and it's got this cool keyboard part on the like Another Way for gnomes to say a bit, and yeah, it's just a really cool song. The ninth song, chapter 24, the lyrics are based on some like Chinese philosophy thing. I think I'm not really like familiar with that, but that's what I read at least. But I really love Sid singing on this one too, and just all the like cool instrumental stuff that's going on. So like when I listen to it, I always just picture like a kaleidoscope kind of is what the music makes me like imagine. I don't know why, but anyway, yeah, just a really cool song. The 10th track, The Scarecrow. Always really loved this one too. The keyboard parts in it kind of remind me of just like, I don't know, like it makes you think of like, I don't know, walking through like some kind of medieval fantasy world, like not just the keyboards, but really like the whole music to the whole song. And I really like Sid singing on it too. It's got some of my favorite lyrics of his on the album, really. But yeah, another one of my favorites. And then finally, Bike, which I think is an amazing way to close the song. Just such a weird, unique song, and it's so I don't know. It's so like catchy in its own way, and it ends on this weird sound collage, which I do kind of usually skip that. But I don't know, I think it's a great way to end the album. So yeah, Piper at the Gates of Dawn is I think definitely a really unique album in Pink Floyd's career. It doesn't really sound like anything else. There's, I don't know, like it's crazy how different they were here. Like you know, Rick, I feel like Rick Wright's, Rick Wright's playing is always like super prominent throughout Pink Floyd for, when he's in the band at least, I feel like. But here it sticks out in a different way. Like he has more like little like solo bits and stuff, it seems like. And definitely the guitar doesn't seem as prominent as with Dave Gilmour in some ways, but it's also kind of harder for me to tell what's guitar on and what's not on here because of some of the stuff that Sid does with his guitar, and then just some of the weirdest sound effects and stuff that they use. Nick Mason also on this plays really different than he would later on. I feel like here he plays all this crazy stuff. I think I might have mentioned this already when I was talking about one of the songs, but yeah, I don't know. They're so different here. But yeah, for me, this album's definitely a 5 out of 5. One of my favorite albums of all time. I'm kind of cautious to recommend it, though, especially in like context of Pink Floyd albums, because it's not really like anything else they ever did, and it's definitely an album that I could see some people having a hard time with because it's not like it's kind of out there. And so to like it, I feel like you have to be able to kind of appreciate something that's a little, just a little weird. So, yeah, definitely not something that's for everybody, but for me, this is definitely a great album.